Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. My name is Scott Leezer. I'm a single ventricle patient, and I'm here today to give you the patient perspective on moving the field forward through advocacy and partnerships. It's a pleasure to be with you, everyone at St. Louis Children's, and especially thank you to Dr. Lee for the invitation to speak today. It's truly an honor. I'd like to share with you how I've turned my personal story into advocacy and activism. I was born with a single ventricle, double inlet left ventricle. I had my first surgery at 6 weeks old, and at 2.5, I had my big one, the Fontan. Shortly after the Fontan, I developed arrhythmias that ultimately led to a series of trips in the emergency room and a scary few months for myself and my family. After those few months, a pacemaker was placed, and I've had a pacemaker since the age of 3. This picture here on the left is me shortly after my first pacemaker. The pacemakers were a lot bigger back then, and I was a lot smaller. It looks like I've got a baseball inside of my chest. I've been able to turn this personal story into advocacy and activism, namely through my experience working in the US Senate with Senator Dick Durbin. Up here on the right is a picture of us together. Senator Durbin, I worked with him from 2011 to 2014 as a member of his health policy staff. And through that experience, I learned of his own personal story with congenital heart disease. Senator Durbin's own daughter had a congenital heart defect born in the 60s. Through a series of surgeries, she was able to be palliated and ultimately go on to live a life into her 40s. Having lost a daughter at age 40 to congenital heart disease, he too has become an advocate and a champion for congenital heart. Ultimately, this experience put me in the place where I was able to understand the federal landscape for congenital heart disease research intimately and be able to move the field forward, both as a staffer and then after being a staffer as an advocate. After leaving his office, I've had the privilege of speaking to national conferences and audiences and regional conferences about my experiences, both as a patient and as an advocate. I had the privilege of speaking before the World Congress of Pediatric Cardiology and Cardiac Surgery in 2017 in Barcelona, Spain, this picture here in the middle. And as a result of my advocacy, I was nominated by my peers for the PR Week's Most Purposeful PR Professional, an award which I'm honored to have received. Most people can say to themselves, potentially the hardships that they face, like congenital heart disease, are ones that they have to overcome or a hardship that they bear. But for me, congenital heart disease is the best thing that has ever happened to me. Because truly, people spend a lifetime looking for purpose, and I was born with mine. And it's been a privilege to be able to serve this community in a way that has meaning both to myself and to the community and to those around me. The interventions have lasted a lifetime. From my first surgery at 6 weeks to my last pacemaker surgery 2 years ago, I have had a series of surgeries, cardioversions, pacemaker replacements, 2 Fontans, 3 open hearts, and ultimately a lifetime of experience living with congenital heart disease. I'm here today to hopefully show you that patients living with congenital heart disease can have full and fulfilling and life-giving life to their everyday. When I was just a child, I didn't really quite understand what congenital heart disease meant for me. I grew up feeling relatively normal. It felt like I was no different than my brother and sister, which is a real true testament to my parents and their dedication to giving me that normal childhood. I had yearly cardiology visits and regular pacemaker checkups, a blip here or there, but for the most part, I felt normal and that felt great. What I didn't realize was that there was underlying issues that I wasn't totally aware of that were related to my heart problem. In school, I struggled. I had my fair share of forgetfulness, of ADD, of moving around the classroom, of kind of being the person who was always being reprimanded and disciplined by the teacher. We know now that congenital heart disease, these are regular symptoms and side effects of congenital heart disease. We don't quite know the cause, but we know that these are common. I was able to overcome these ultimately and go on to Marquette University and obviously have a fulfilling career. But in the moment, it felt like I was troubled. I didn't quite get school. I didn't quite do my homework. I didn't quite listen all the time, and I often got in trouble. I think that we as a community need to acknowledge that these are challenges that our kids in elementary and middle school and high school, they have to overcome. And I think we're moving the field in that direction. We certainly understand that these interventions have an impact on the ultimate educational success, and that, you know, there are IEPs and 503s and 504s that really allow us to set a new agenda for education for congenital heart disease patients. And I think that they're incredibly important. Shortly after leaving Durbin's office, I came across this study, 40-year follow-up after the Fontan operation. This is taken from a cohort of patients at Mayo Clinic, the same place that I had had my surgery. This was 40 years of patients who had had the Fontan, and I was among them. These were my peers. These were the patients who before and after me went into the same operating room being treated by the same doctors. And I looked at these numbers and they kind of were sobering. I had my surgery in 1989 and the 30-year survival rate is 30%. Last year, I reached that 30-year survival rate, but it came with a grim reality. 55% of my peers are no longer with us. Now, in the years since this surgical eras, we've certainly seen better improvement in the surgical mortality rate. But I also see these blank squares that are with us. You know, what's the 20-year survival rate for those with Fontan in 2001 or beyond, or the 30-year survival rate? And I think we're all called to making this as high as possible. We all have a role to play in making the 40-year or 50-year or 60-year Fontan operation follow-up for these patients as bright as possible. In 2016, I was asked to speak at the Cleveland Clinic. I was told that the meeting was about single ventricle heart disease. When I got there, I realized that it was about single ventricle heart disease, but it was also about the failing Fontan. At 8 o'clock, I opened the program with a welcoming address, as giving the patient perspective to help set the tone for the next 2 days of lectures. By 8:15, the audience was hearing why Fontans fail. Over the course of the next day and a half, we walked through sobering statistics, and I knew that if I could do something to help address this issue, I should. Luckily for me, I had met a doctor in Indianapolis, Dr. Mark Rodefeld, who was working on a remarkable and innovative device called the Fontan blood pump. I typed out an email and said that I'd like to help him raise some funds for a website and a documentary to help to get the word out. This email turned into a GoFundMe campaign where he asked me to raise $350,000 for his next generation prototype. I said, Mark, you're crazy. $350,000 is the job of a full-time development professional with a Rolodex of contacts. We eventually settled on $100,000 and we launched a GoFundMe campaign. Here's the video.
Skylar Paige Bennett was born with hypoplastic left heart syndrome on March 17, 2015. Hearing those scary words invited many questions from her concerned parents. They were fortunate enough to have Dr. Mark Rodefeld on their side, walking them through what to expect in the months to come.
The formation of the heart is a complex process, and if the process doesn't go just right, then a chamber may not form. And without medical treatment, those are uniformly fatal heart defects.
Single ventricle heart defect is a rare disease which affects one of the two main pumping chambers of the heart. Each year in the United States, more than 1,250 patients undergo surgeries to correct this defect. Unfortunately, surgery is not a cure. Skylar has completed 2 of the 3 procedures recommended. She will receive her final surgery, the Fontan procedure, in the summer of 2017.
When a child has a Fontan operation, historically we've said, well, they're finished with surgery and good to go for the rest of their life. As 20 or 30 years have gone by, and as we've seen these kids get into adulthood, we're beginning to see signs of their circulations failing.
When a Fontan patient's heart inevitably fails, the only option is a heart transplant. Heart transplants are life-saving, but exchange one set of complications for another set.
As I've thought about this problem and trying to improve things, when I've looked at Fontan patients and simplistically looked at them as missing one of their pumps, the question to me has been, well, could that pump be replaced? And could it be done in a way that's safe and reliable?
Dr. Rodefeld's research aims to place a small pump in the hearts of Fontan patients to emulate a normal 2-ventricle circulation and reduce the need for a heart transplant. There is only one barrier holding back this prototype from being made: funding.
In order to get the current prototype built, I need additional funding to complete that process. Once that's done and the prototype functions well, which I'm confident it will, I will be able to apply for major funding again from the NIH to refine that design and get it close to human application.
Our goal is to make a short documentary about Skylar's journey and how Dr. Rodefeld's research can impact lives. In addition to the documentary, we want to jumpstart the funds to make Dr. Rodefeld's pump a reality.
I would say there's a message of hope. With this blood pump being properly developed, these patients can be cured, and they really have a good prospect of living a normal lifespan.
Skylar is currently doing well, but she, along with thousands of other patients dealing with this defect, are living on borrowed time. This is why we are turning to you to help move this promising research forward. Any contribution will help make this potentially life-saving concept a reality.
To date, we've raised over almost $100,000 online. But ultimately, we've raised much more than that offline through the awareness that we've generated through the GoFundMe campaign. We've had donors from 5 different continents, over 300 donors in total, and we have a community of over 3,500 people on Facebook that are actively engaged. We can post a video on a Sunday, and by Tuesday, it'll have 10,000 views from hundreds of locations in dozens of countries. But I think what's most important is that it's giving people hope. This is a family member who's involved in our campaign, Chris, about his son. There are many ups and downs, speaking of his child born with transposition of the great arteries, including 2 cardiac arrests, 2 runs on ECMO, and many long nights in the ICU. In the end, he made a miraculous recovery and is doing great, but the sad reality of CHD is that Owen's heart going to fail, and probably in my lifetime. That's the fear of Chris and of many patients and many parents with patients with congenital heart disease. And through this project, I have found that we're able to provide a sliver of hope, that there are researchers and clinicians and engineers and governments that are helping to move this field forward, and they're able to have that sliver of hope that the field is bright. Ultimately, our campaign boiled down to three things that I think it provided. One, it provided the funds that Mark needed to build his prototype. 2, it provided the awareness that this life-saving research is potentially on the horizon and that other research is out there as well. And 3, it provided a hope of a brighter future for single ventricle patients. Collaboration and involvement from dozens, hundreds of families around the country. These are some of their faces. To be able to share their stories as a reason why we need to move the field forward. And sadly, as I look at some of these faces, I already see a few of them who are no longer with us, which is just even more of a stark reality on why we need to move and why we need to continue with our collaboration, both patients and providers, to move the field forward. The real lift we got from this campaign was from the organizational donors that through the GoFundMe campaign came to learn of Mark's research. Overall, we've had these 5 major organizations give $100,000 or close to it in organizational support to Mark's research. It shows that we can come together as patients and families for small dollar donations on GoFundMe and raise almost $100,000. And we can also go and we can kind of put the pieces together for multiple organizations to also do the same and really have a force multiplying event. Here's the timeline of how we worked and the success that we've had. In 2016, we launched the GoFundMe campaign. By 2017, we had raised enough money to complete the prototype that Mark had set out to make. In 2018, that prototype was completed and the feasibility testing had proved that it was feasible. By 2019, the Fontan blood pump's progress was published in the Journal of Thoracic and Cardiovascular Surgery, and the campaign exceeded $500,000 raised. And in 2020, armed with the promising feasibility research and the prototype, Mark was able to go to the NIH and was able to receive a 5-year NIH R01 worth over $8 million, which will ultimately take the pump from prototype and concept to through animal testing and ready for human trials. Another initiative that I'm working on that I think is important that shows and demonstrates the power of patient and provider collaboration is the Congenital Heart Initiative. The Congenital Heart Initiative is a patient registry to unite patients, providers, researchers to improve the lives of adults living with congenital heart defects. There are a lot of data sets out there right now that track the progress and the well-being of patients with congenital heart disease. But for the most part, those data sets are entered by providers and looked at by providers. And what we wanted to create was something different, where the patients provided their perspective, where we asked them questions about the quality of life, about their physical activity, about their employment status, their family status. And we were able to really paint a fuller picture of not just what's happening in the clinic or in the hospital, but also what's happening beyond that. What's the full picture of these patients? And through the Congenital Heart Disease and the Congenital Heart Initiative, we aim to improve our understanding of the ACHD population by asking these types of questions about these non-clinical settings. We hope that this can help inform future research projects within the community, can help spur innovation. We can have researchers being able to tap into a cohort of adults who are looking to be involved in research. We can improve the quality of life by congenital heart disease through this research and through a better understanding and fundamentally change the way that America understands and cares for adult patients with congenital heart disease. And that is ultimately what we're looking for, is to fundamentally improve the quality of life. Here's our video about the Congenital Heart Disease Initiative.
As a single ventricle patient, living with a congenital heart defect for your entire life can feel kind of isolating. So the Congenital Heart Initiative was born out of the patient and provider community coming together to create a digital platform for patients to provide their data and connect the community.
We don't want just research, we want better research. We're inviting adult congenital heart patients to answer sets of questions that have been developed by researchers, clinicians, and other adults with congenital heart disease.
Our goal with this initiative is to design a tool that will help us be able to further study outcomes in patients with congenital heart disease as they grow into adulthood and improve their access to care and their quality to care.
I think it benefits enrollees by giving you a sense of power among taking some of your care into your own hands. It gives you a space to be able to open up and share those things that you might not have shared previously. By doing that, you're not only giving hope to current patients and patients to come, but you're being part of a monumental moment in congenital heart disease history.
Collaboration is paramount, and this project is a perfect example of how collaboration can make a difference. How do we improve patient outcomes? How do we decide what is the research that's most critical?
The only way we're going to learn and grow is through us, the patients, speaking up. By sharing my story and my data, we'll be looked back upon in 20, 25 years, and so much will have come from it.
It's a very simple process to be able to register. We will ask their name, email address, date of birth. They'll be taken to the electronic consent form where they can review all of the different aspects of the initiative and then make a decision as to whether or not they want to participate.
Everybody's story is stronger together. I'm hopeful that thousands of patients will join us in this initiative, that thousands of patients will add their voice to the registry and create a community that really is centered on improving outcomes, spurring research, spurring innovation, and really trying to move the field forward.
This project was made possible through partnership and collaboration. Ultimately, these 6 organizations here at the bottom, Children's National leading the charge, the Adult Congenital Heart Association, University of California, San Francisco, as well as dozens of others, have really stepped up to lead the charge to help create this platform and this digital hub to connect patients' stories and to allow them to share their voice. We've also had collaboration and input from the National Institutes of Health, the American College of Cardiology, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and PCORI. In total, we've had over 200 individuals, patients and providers from more than 15 different organizations to assist and build this registry. We have a community that's engaged with almost 500 followers on Twitter and Facebook. And to date, we've had 826 patients signed up with 719 consented users. When we launched this in December 7th, 2020, we had hoped to get 1,000 patients in the, and by March or February, we were 75% of the way towards our goal. We have 48 states represented, 8 countries. This is garnering international interest from Canada and elsewhere who want to be involved in this registry. We have 20 different CHD conditions. We know that 30% of the patients have pacers or ICDs, which was much higher than we were expecting. And we have a pretty vast age group from everywhere from over 60 to 30 to 39. We're really being able to see the whole spectrum of the CHD population. These are the top reported conditions, tetralogy of flow, transposition of the great arteries, all the way to the single ventricle population and Fontan. And the future of this registry project is bright. We're excited to bring quarterly dashboards of their data reported back to them, available to participants. We're working on manuscripts to get them published in journals. We're looking for further organizational and institutional partnerships, helped spurred on by a recent PCORI grant, 3-year grant, $30.5 million in funding that's really going to provide gasoline to this initiative. And we hope to do future requests for research questions from patients, future analysis on what are the factors that are associated with gaps in care. What's the impact that COVID-19 is happening on our well-being and on health for the CHD population? What's the comorbidities that exist in the CHD subtypes? What's the quality of life for these CHD patients? And what's the impact of physical activity on those patient population as well? I hope that this will provide a better understanding and a brighter future for these patients, and ultimately be able to unite the community around being able to lift up patient voices. And one day, we hope this won't just be an ACHD registry. We hope this will be a registry for the entire congenital heart disease population. A while back, I had the privilege of witnessing an open heart surgery. I was 25 years old. It had been several years since my last surgery, and decades earlier, I had had my childhood surgery. I was watching an 8-month-old get operated on. And, I expected this like TV drama moment where you can almost feel the tension and the stress, that it would be palpable. You know what I witnessed instead? I witnessed everybody doing their job and doing it with a sense of purpose and with a levelness that I didn't anticipate. I felt calm and collected. They understood what they were doing. They also understood, as the parents sat out there, that this was going to be one of the most monumental days of this child's life. For the surgeons and the nurses and the OR staff, it was just another day, but for the patients and the families, this was a monumental moment. And I also thought about what they were doing in that room, that they weren't just looking to give that child a successful surgery. That success to them wasn't going to just be getting the child out of the OR and into the recovery room or going home. That to them, what they were giving this child was birthdays and family vacations and college graduations and a career, and hopefully to meet the love of their life and to get married, to have children one day. These are my kids, age 5 and age 3. They're my purpose. But my purpose is also in life to provide more families and to provide more children with this bright future, to do our part. I'm not a surgeon, I'll never be, but I can still play a role. We can all play a role in creating this brighter future, ensuring that patients, when we do the 50 or 60-year Fontan follow-up, that they're living 85, 90, 95, 98% into adulthood, that they're living fulfilling life, that they're getting the educational support that they need, that we truly understand their, why Fontans fail and what we can do about it, that we truly understand the patient population, the quality of life, the educational attainment, the occupational opportunities. That all matters, and we all can play a part. It's a privilege to be with you today, and I hope that you all take with you that we all have the power and the opportunity to play a role in creating a brighter future for single ventricle patients. Thank you.